All right, good morning, everyone. Very happy to have this policy session this morning. I would like to bring a few words of introduction first, and then we'll move to our keynote speakers, and then to a panel. As you know, and as we've already discussed, Europe is at a critical juncture to accelerate its competitive, secure, and sustainable transition. One of the main challenges in Europe is the price of energy. Not only electricity, gas too, but just to illustrate, electricity prices in Europe are typically 2.5 times higher than in the US. At the same time, we know that energy in general and energy imports are a tax on the European economy. Today, in 2024, Europe has actually imported 380 billion euros of energy products from abroad. To a degree, this is what we call the Europe's unique energy trilemma. We are trying to reconcile and balance affordability and cost competitiveness of energy, but also the security of energy supply, and third, advance our decarbonization agenda. So really these three objectives. This triple challenge shapes and needs to shape every policy decision and investment decision that we take in Europe. It will define the ability of Europe to compete globally. We believe that decarbonization is actually and can actually be, especially through electrification, a key source of competitiveness and innovation for Europe. But of course, it will require that we build further on the Green Deal by taking into consideration a strong industrial policy agenda to really integrate better the notion of competitiveness at a time where, the global competition is shaping up, particularly with other geographic blocks. In that regard, the European Clean Industrial Deal is actually going in the right direction in the sense of integrating all these notions of competitiveness. So electrification for us is a key and has to be a key asset for Europe, and we need to definitely accelerate here. There's a second very big transition that complements electrification and decarbonization, which is the digitalization transition, or the digital transition. Why is it so important? Because actually across the board, digital is one of the transverse sources of competitiveness and efficiency. We know when we actually digitalize and automate industry, they become much more competitive. Second, we actually need digital for the electrification. You remember that if we are, and that's the intent, to triple the proportion of electricity in our energy landscape, we actually need to cope with all these electrons on our existing grid. So of course there will be grid investments on the hardware side, but we also need to make our grid smarter, which is done through digital software and AI. So that's really where we see that the digital transition is a complement to the electrification agenda and is actually necessary. And today, it is clear that many companies in Europe struggle to deploy digital at scale. In fact, when you ask them, less than 30% of companies tell you that they're comfortable deploying at scale digital capabilities. There's a shortage of skills, there's a complex regulatory environment, and to a degree, we really need to seize the AI tools and run with them through a very fast deployment. So today, it's time for Europe to take action and unleash innovation and growth. How will we do that? That's really where there are a number of questions linked to how we accelerate the financing of the green transition, especially to support small and medium-sized companies in that regard. Second, how do we actively and massively take the opportunity of AI to deploy it in our companies, especially in key sectors like energy, for competitiveness and the acceleration of decarbonization? How do we finalize the integrated and unified European market? It's a big question when it comes to electricity prices, but in general, to have a more massive market that is actually a source of volume and competitiveness for our industrial companies. And finally, designing the right policies to really support that shift to a sustainable and competitive economy. So, over the past 2 days, we've discussed energy technology, automation, decarbonization, and AI, powerful forces that are shaping Europe's future. But without the right policies, we will not move fast enough to turn that ambition into industrial leadership and success. That's why, as an energy tech company and as energy tech leaders, we are proud today to host this policymakers panel here in Copenhagen to elevate these voices and really talk about the policy context that can help Europe. We will begin with 2 exceptional keynote speakers. First, it's my pleasure to welcome Fatih Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. He will share with us his bold vision for a resilient and competitive energy future, powered by innovation, electrification, and global cooperation. After Fatih, we will have Nicolai Wammen, Denmark's finance minister, who actually has a very busy day today. We will explore how strategic public investment can de-risk clean technologies and secure Europe's long-term economic resilience. A final word, a special thanks to Synergy and the Danish Chamber of Commerce, because they've really helped us organize this session. Thank you very much, and up to you, Fatih.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to be at this important event of Schneider Electric, a company that I work since many years in my previous job, in my current job. So it is great to be with you today. We'll be discussing many day-to-day issues you are facing today, challenges and opportunities. I thought I try to provide you with a macro picture. I would like to, before going to energy, however, I want to make a note of the current major issue, which is the geopolitics. Normally, I never talk about the geopolitics, but today, when it comes to energy world, I see that the dark and long shadow of geopolitics is all over the energy world. I work on energy issues for some time. Energy and geopolitics were always interwoven, but I have never seen at this stage. And I prefer, as an energy person, energy is an economic issue, technological issue, rather than political issue, but this is what the realities are today. So just put in this context that the world is in. From there, when I look at the global energy picture, I see 3 important challenges in front of us. The very first one is the energy security. Energy security, to have a secure supplies of energy, has always been an issue. But now, I believe, given the geopolitical context we are in many cases, energy security is almost equal to national security in many countries, in many regions. And energy security is also changing its definition. In the past, when we look at the past in the last few years and before, it was oil and gas security. When we talk about energy security, they came to our mind. while they continue to be an important energy security topic, we are seeing the electricity security and the security of critical minerals and supply chain emerge as energy security challenges. So this is the first issue, first global challenge in terms of energy I see. The second one is climate change. Energy is, of course, at the heart of climate change debate because 85% of the emissions causing climate change come from the energy sector. But, dear colleagues, when I look at the climate change, I see two opposite trends. Trend number one, we see the impacts of climate change in an increasing way in our daily lives. Last year was the hottest year in the history. And number of extreme weather events, wildfires, droughts, floods, they increase both in terms of their frequency and their intensity. This is trend number one. Trend number two in climate change is the global political attention, national political attention given the climate change is sliding down in the agenda of the governments. Most governments, at least. So normally, the bad news on the climate change impact should give a boost to increase of the attention to climate change, but this is not happening. This is the second trend I want to put on the table. The third and the last one is something that some of you may follow our work, that I am working over 3 decades, the energy access in emerging and developing countries. In terms of electricity, for example, if I can give you one number, I just looked this morning. In my view, if somebody asked me, can you describe what is the biggest injustice in the energy world, I would definitely nominate this number. Sub-Saharan Africa. Every second person, 50% of Sub-Saharan Africa people, they don't have access to electricity. This is number one. Number two, Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest amount of solar radiation, best quality solar radiation in the world. And yet, amount of solar electricity we generate in the entire Sub-Saharan Africa is less than solar electricity we generate in Belgium. Think about the Belgium. I don't know if we have anybody from Belgium here. Sorry for them. But Belgium and the Sub-Saharan Africa, they produce the same amount of solar electricity when the solar prices goes so down. So this is a major issue that I believe, together with energy security and climate change, goes to the main topics of the strategic energy issues. Dear colleagues, this general picture brings me a topic that I believe is or should be interest to Schneider Electric and many of you and to all of us, in fact. Some 1.5 years ago, looking at the numbers at the IEA, we look at the numbers daily basis. I tell my colleagues, data always wins. Sometimes it takes some time, but at the end of the day, data always wins. So look at the numbers. I said, the world may be entering the age of electricity. So what do I mean with that? Our economies, our societies has been fueled by always a dominant energy source. 200 years ago, when there was the Industrial Revolution, it was the coal, age of coal. Remember the novels of Emile Zola, for example. Coal miners bringing coal to the industries, to the factories. Coal was still there, but the age of coal has been replaced by age of oil and gas, what we have today. And we will use oil and gas years to come, but when I look at the numbers, I see age of electricity is coming. Just numbers. In the last 10 years, global energy demand increased, and global electricity demand increased 2 times higher than the global energy demand. And in the next 10 years, we are seeing it, global electricity demand will increase 6 times higher than the global energy demand. We are seeing a major surge of electricity demand everywhere, but everywhere. For example, in Europe or United States, almost 10 years, electricity demand was more or less stable, and now it is going up for the first time since maybe 15 years. Why it is happening globally? In addition to the traditional sources of electricity demand, there are 3 relatively new drivers coming. One of them is artificial intelligence and data centers. Data centers, dear colleagues, they need 24/7 electricity. And just put in a context, one medium-sized data center consumes electricity as much as a city of 100,000 households. And these data centers are mushrooming around the world. Small, medium, big. And this is a major driver of global electricity demand, as there is a huge race among the countries for AI who will be the front runner. And in my view, my personal view is that AI is most likely the most consequential technological innovation of the humanity ever. This is the number 1 driver of the age of electricity. Number 2, many of you, I guess, not many colleagues are coming from from emerging and developing countries. This is the increasing sales and purchases of air conditioners. In the United States, for example, or Japan, 90% of the households, they own an air conditioner. In Nigeria, it is 5%. India, 20%. Indonesia, 18%. With the increasing temperatures and the increasing income levels in those countries, people buy air conditioners, and which in turn boost the global electricity consumption, another driver of age of electricity. And the third one, which pushes the electricity demand up in an unprecedented way in the recent history, is the increasing number of electric cars. Dear colleagues, 4 years ago, only 4% of the electric, 4% all the cars sold was electric. The share of electric cars in total car sales were 4%, and this year it is 25%. And it will grow. It is growing. It is impossible to stop, just because of economics. Forget the climate change, this change, it is because of the economics. They are getting cheaper, more convenient, much more interlinked with what else you do in the daily life. There will be slowdown in this country, speed up other country, but the direction is very clear. So as a result of these 3 things, dear colleagues, namely the electric cars penetration, very strong, air conditioners growth, unstoppable, a human right, and the artificial intelligence, we see electricity demand surging very, very strongly, and the age of electricity is here. And it has many implications. Many, many implications. I want to highlight only one of them, which I believe is, or at least has been, a blind spot of many governments, many years, most governments, namely lack of capacity of grids, transmission lines and distribution lines, and their capacity and their quality. And this is becoming a major, major obstacle for the age of electricity in many countries, and leads to a lot of loss of economic value. If I can give you one example, renewables. Bulk of the electricity demand around the world, the growth is met by renewables. Solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal, whatever. Dear colleagues, last year, the world, entire world, added 750 gigawatts of renewables to the global power system, 750. Mainly solar, but also wind, onshore, offshore, etc. This is good. But, now this is coming to the problem. But, while 750 is added, 1,700 gigawatts, more than 2/3 of it, power plants were ready, but they didn't have the capacity of grid to be connected to the grid and go to the households, factories, here and there. You built the power plants, but you didn't build the necessary grids to bring it to the consumers. This is economically, I don't want to use a bad word, but this is economically really, really a major loss. And now, I believe the number one issue in many countries, build grids, transmission lines, distribution lines, in order to bring the power plants to consumers, and therefore there is a need to increase the investments there. Currently, investment going $1 for power plants and $0.4 for the grids. In our calculation, to have a more sustainable electricity sector, it should be 1-to-1. If you put $1 for power plants, $1 for the transmission, distribution lines and grids. This is the age of electricity, and I believe in this context, one has to look at an important part of it, which is at the heart of the geopolitical debate today. It is the critical minerals. International Energy Agency smelled that critical minerals would be an issue, and since 2021, we built a huge group and have the best database in the world, which critical minerals, which country, which mine, which investment, sellers, buyers, refineries, and so on. And when we look at this unprecedented database, I can tell you that the world may well face a challenge that a very few number of countries, maybe one, maybe two, can dominate the game in a way that it may lead to tensions among the countries. I mentioned energy security. For me, dear colleagues, energy security golden rule number 1 is diversification. The number of countries you import energy, you export energy, the number of trade routes should be as much as possible, not one single country. Even though it is the most innocent country in the world, you don't rely on them. You don't put all the eggs in one basket. In Europe, we made this mistake by relying on one single country. I will come in a moment. So therefore, in the critical minerals area, I see that there is a huge need for diversification of the mining and the refining of critical minerals. Other words, if everything is linked to one country, if this country changes its policies, or if there is a natural disaster, an earthquake or whatever, the entire global supply chain will be affected negatively from that. From here, 10 days of time, I will be at the G7 meeting. It will be my message to the G7 countries and others, find ways to diversify it. Dear colleagues, since I understood most of the colleagues here are from Europe, I want to finish my words, some comments about Europe. I was listening the previous speech, and that it is true that Europe today has a major competitiveness problem when it comes to energy. But this is not a matter of wrong policies, right policies in the last few years. I think, in my view, Europe made 3 historical strategic mistakes when it comes to energy. Number 1, I briefly mentioned, Europe energy was relying heavily, over-reliance on importing energy from one country. Gas, oil, coal, and the others. And this was a risky business, we told them, European leaders. And when the gas was cut, prices went up, and this is a major, major issue. The second one, however, is on electricity. End of 1990s, about 1/3 of the European electricity was coming from nuclear power. 1/3. But European countries turned their back to nuclear power, and very soon it is coming to about 15%. Big loss, in my view. Something that the Europeans excelled and then put it aside. The third one is on the innovation, on the technology, which is solar power. Dear colleagues, some 20 years ago, when solar renewables were a romantic story, not like a main business like today, it was Europe who started the solar technology. Put a lot of money, subsidies, Spain, Italy, Germany. But after a while, they dropped the ball. China took it over. Today, 90% of the solar panels are manufactured in China. So Europe made these 3 big mistakes. As a result of that, lost a big edge on the energy technologies, and with energy prices and the competitiveness became a major topic for Europe. There are lots of today around the world, here and there, when it comes to energy, Europe bashing. Europe this wrong, that wrong, yes. But this shouldn't go too far. Europe is still has the largest single market with 450 million people, the biggest exporter of the world, receives the biggest amount of investments around the world, a great hub for innovation. And if Europe is able to embrace the age of electricity, I think this will provide to Europe a very important strategy for its industry and technological development. Dear colleagues, I travel around the world, and I can tell you, leave aside the energy technology, Europe is still a source of inspiration for millions of people around the world, with its values, with its way of life. And I hope European leaders provide the industrial economic strategy where we embrace the age of electricity and flourish the European economy, working together with Europe's allies around the world. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
I don't need to go. No, I don't need to go. Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. We're very lucky to have you and to have shared your insights on how to lead a successful energy transition in this very much geopolitical world. I would like to ask you to thank Dr. Birol for joining us today at the Innovation Summit. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Minister of Finance of Denmark, Nikolai Vammen.
Thank you for the invitation and your kind reception. It is indeed a great honor to be here with you. And also a warm welcome to Denmark. We are thrilled to have you. We are a country with a strong economy and the highest green ambitions. Let me take you on a short trip back in time. 6 years ago, we formed a government in Denmark with a completely new approach to the green transition, to climate, to greenhouse gas emissions, and to the responsibility we have to deliver a better world to the next generation. The Danish Climate Act, with a legally binding target, 70% cut in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But one thing is to set a target, another thing is to deliver. So the best part is, last year, only 5 years after setting the target, we have found the way to reach the goal. As finance minister, through all of those years, I can honestly tell you, it has not been a walk in the park. Hard work, focus, dedication, and the commitment that this is so important. Let us use the approach going forward, because, let's be honest, in the European Union, we are facing major challenges. Security and competitiveness are our main focus during the Danish EU presidency, which is taking place right now. And the two top priorities on the European agenda. To remain competitive, we need to adapt to a new international order with growing uncertainty, economic and technological competition, and trade barriers. In certain key sectors, the EU has become too dependent on others, on individual countries that do not necessarily share our interests nor our values. This poses a risk to our security, our supply, and ultimately our broader security. Therefore, we must increase the resilience of our economies. One of the key answers to that is to speed up the green transition, to become more self-sufficient in green energy, ensure a stable, clean, and affordable energy supply for consumers and for business, strengthen our competitiveness reduce our dependence on imported fossil fuels, and do it all without risking the most important ingredient in the big social transitions, support from the people. If not, if we go too far or too fast without acknowledging the consequences in ordinary people's daily lives, we will fail, and we will see popular sentiments grow. During the Danish EU presidency, we are working for a strong and resolute EU, an EU that is able to act and take greater responsibility for our own security. However, increased autonomy must not come at the expense of long-term productivity and growth. We cannot close ourselves off to the rest of the world, nor should we. But we need to find new ways. Strong, productive economies with sound public finances and good trade relations are essential for financing our strategic priorities, including security. But it requires hard choices and a will to commit to necessary structural reforms. The Danish economy is in very good shape. Employment in this country is the highest it has ever been. Danish businesses have performed remarkably well on the international stage. The Danish economy is fundamentally rock solid, and public finances exceptionally strong. That gives us a very good outset to build on policies pursued over recent decades. Important reforms have been implemented and sound and responsible fiscal policy has been conducted. Therefore, today, Denmark is one of the best countries in the world to do business in, and Danish companies are among the most productive in the world, partly because Danish firms have access to skilled and flexible workers. A strong Danish economy gives us a good starting point, but it's not enough. This is a small country with an open economy. We rely heavily on a strong and competitive European economy. The EU is our most important trade partner, and we are a part of that community of Europe. As the Draghi report points out, this is not a time for Europe to be self-satisfied or to lean back and hope for the best. We must strengthen European competitiveness. It is not only important for our economy and businesses, but also for the future resilience and security. And it is a top priority during the Danish presidency. If we want to strengthen our position in the world, we need to show that the European model works. We need to make it easier to do business in Europe, and during the Danish presidency, we focus on actually reducing bureaucracy and over-regulation. We are currently pushing for the progress on the Commission's proposal that aims to reduce the burdens and simplifying existing legislation without compromising our political goals and objectives. But looking back and fixing past mistakes is not enough. We must also look at how we regulate going forward, how to achieve our political goals without introducing new unnecessary burdens tomorrow. Europe has a unique opportunity to drive the green transition, while also strengthening our competitiveness. We have world-leading companies within electrification, energy efficiency, and automation. And if we utilize these competences in the right way, we can increase competitiveness by lowering prices, while also decarbonizing our economies and strengthening our energy security. There is plenty of untapped potential in the single market, and recent studies by the IMF and the Central Bank of Denmark documents a substantial potential for increased trade between EU countries compared to the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know this is a time of great uncertainty concerning our overseas trade relations. We must continue to integrate our markets, reap the benefits of increased trade, where it is within our own reach. We must make progress on more integrated financial markets. Despite good intentions, they remain still too fragmented. More integrated financial markets means more efficient capital allocation. It has the potential to increase investment levels and make it easier to start up and scale up new businesses in Europe. So in conclusion, basically, this is simple. We must now do our part to increase resilience, remove unnecessary regulations, burdens, and implement a green transition. We must invest in making our economies more prosperous and greener. And if we do it in the right way, with social balances, we can show not only in words, but in deeds. And that is what we have done in this country. That green transformation is not hindering growth. Green transformation makes growth for a country. That is our task. That is our goal. Together, we can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So time for us to move to the panel. But before that, I'd like to thank our keynote speakers. A very clear message from Dr. Birol on the need and the call to action for Europe to embrace the age of electricity. And a very good example with Denmark of what is doable and the next steps for us to, again, embrace electricity in Europe. Now, I'd like to call on stage our panelists under your applause. First, Christian Ruby, Secretary General of Euroelectric. Hi, Christian. Yeah, you can maybe go ahead. Christina Pereteacu, State Secretary and Ministry of Energy for Republic of Moldova. Hello. Welcome. Emeline Spear, Director Europe of Agora Energy Vendor. And Morten Elvek Peterson, Chairman of the Board of Synergy and former member of the European Parliament. Thank you. All right. So we'll first explore the question of the role of policy in driving a competitive and sustainable Europe with a series of a few questions. So first, Christian, I'd like to turn to you. You know, Europe is at a turning point with increased global competition. Do you think Europe is in danger of losing out, and can regulation help? So that's a broad question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we need to be clear and honest about the fact that we are in a fundamentally new situation that we haven't faced before. 3 years ago, my job felt complex. We talked a lot about the green transition. Now, the amount of challenges has basically exploded. We're facing a very complex geopolitical backdrop. We are facing an affordability crisis, and all the while we need to decarbonize. So it is becoming more complex. We need to stay the course, essentially, and make sure that we don't forget about the manifold benefits that electrification holds for us in terms of energy security, in terms of decarbonization, and ultimately also in terms of affordability. I think the affordability crisis that we're facing right now, first of all, we need to set it in perspective. We have less of a problem than 2 years ago. Secondly, this is a giant business opportunity for people that provide energy efficiency solutions, that provide solutions for facilitating grid access and making electricity cheaper in the end. So yes, we are challenged, but I think it's all about staying the course right now and making the most, remembering European values.
Thank you. We've heard about the geopolitical challenges. In this time of geopolitical uncertainty, I'd like to turn to you, Christina. What is Moldova's energy strategy to ensure competitiveness and, in fact, also energy security currently?
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I think Moldova is one of the few countries for which the geopolitical issues has played a very positive role. In a sense that in 2022, when the war started, we have managed to disconnect our electrical systems from Russia, Belarus, and connect to MSOE. We have managed to start the EU accession process, which for us opened tremendous opportunities. And we have finally created the Ministry of Energy. We did not have a Ministry of Energy in the Republic of Moldova. So, and in the process of EU accession, you need to play by the game that are, by the rules, better say, that are imposed by the European Union, meaning that you have to have a vision and to decarbonize your country till 2050. For those of you who do not know, Moldova is a very small country bordering Romania and Ukraine, and for many years we have been reliant on so-called cheap Russian gas. So for us, currently one of the main priorities is the security of supply and actually diversifying everything that we import to the Republic of Moldova, because we import 100% gas, we import 100% fuel products. Although we started producing more renewable energy, we are still very much reliant on imports when it comes to electricity. Then we need to couple to EU markets. And in order to couple to EU markets, we need to build infrastructure, which we still don't have. Currently, we are working on free interconnectors with Romania, and although we are connected to MSOE, this is a net capacity that comes together for Moldova and Ukraine, so still makes us quite vulnerable when it comes to electricity. Being a former Soviet country, having inherited an architecture that is made of concrete, so practically all buildings in Moldova, residential and public buildings, they waste energy. So more than 50% of our energy is wasted in buildings. And one of the objectives that we have, bless you by the way, is energy efficiency comes first. And everyone knows in Europe that this is a very expensive objective to be realized. Then we are moving towards digitalization that we are speaking already for the second day, and without which the decarbonization and the development, the electrification regarding everything related to energy is impossible. And of course, innovations. And in that regard, I am very proud to mention that as a country that is heavily reliant on imports, we have made, came with a solution that is called sandboxes in energy. So at this stage, we are practically the only one country in Europe that has a law that promotes innovations in energy. So we want to revolutionize the energy sector by testing technologies, clean technologies, except nuclear. And this is an opportunity to invite to Moldova innovators, researchers who perhaps have very good R&Ds and R&Is within their companies, but because they have a national regulatory agency that is not very welcoming or is very much delaying the innovative solutions, they cannot test their ideas. We are a bureaucratic country, but we are still not that bureaucratic as European Union is. And for us, it's very important to see how we can navigate in this transition towards green energy and find solutions that will be helping our countries actually to succeed. And of course, the just transition that everyone is mentioning. I think one of the biggest challenges in this equation is how to make energy accessible to everyone, taking into consideration that for so many years we have been fed up with the thought that energy comes from Russia and energy is cheap. And the biggest challenge we are facing now is actually to explain to our citizens, to our consumers, that energy is not cheap. And maybe it will become at a certain point. But while we're transitioning it, better say we are in a period of transition, we are still looking for solutions. And of course, the deployment of renewable energy, we organized this year the first bid for big capacities for solar and wind. But I think that the future is still going to surprise us in a sense that Mr. Birol mentioned the grids. We have spoken for so many years only about solar energy, wind energy, but we have never really tackled upon the grids, which is now, I think, the weakest chain in the whole equation. And we need to, if we speak about technology and cooperation, we need also to understand how we develop the grids and make them smart to help us, interconnect fast and ensure that digitalization is helping us all. Mm-hmm. And competitiveness, that is the word, the main word in the question. Taking into account that we are a country bordering the war, unfortunately, we are not still competitive because investors are still hesitant to come to Moldova. However, we have managed to keep the peace within the country. We are developing, we are in the process of EU accession, we have sandbox, innovations in energy, we are organizing bids for renewable energy. So this is an opportunity for better countries, if I could say this way, to come and get to know us better and maybe help us become a part of this whole Europe that talks today about the green transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to you, Morten. We are talking about competitiveness in the case of Moldova, actually. Until very recently, you were a member of the parliament. So how do you see the political shift and also the speed, or the question of the speed, to move from the Green Deal, which was very focused on sustainability and to a degree constraints, to an agenda of competitiveness for Europe?
So it's radically different today compared to just 3, 4, 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, we see energy issues, energy prices being, if you will, weaponized politically. It's a political battle now on some of these issues, and I think it's important to bear in mind that when we saw the Ukraine invasion and gas prices were spiking, you had, not least in France, by the way, you had Gilets jaunes, you had people in the streets, you had real worries all over Europe whether people would take it to the streets and tear up their energy bills. So this is dramatically different also in a policy and political context. 3, 4, 5 years ago, we were discussing higher targets, mandatory policies, member states being member states having to implement whatever came out of the Commission and European Parliament as well. Now it's totally different. We have new political majorities, new political compositions in the European Council and in the European Parliament as well. So this all changes the narratives around energy efficiency, electrification, and a lot of the other energy issues. And we, as an industry, so to speak, have to come to terms with this. What is this changed narrative focusing now on competitiveness, resilience, and security rather than only climate? So that's a real challenge for all of us working in this industry, and we have to sort of change or develop the narrative accordingly, ensuring that people feel safe also when winter is approaching, essentially. So it's very different just compared to 3 years ago.
And how fast do you think we can go in evolving?
Good question, because there is real worries. There are real worries out there about the speed of this. But on the other hand, I think efficiency and electrification has so much going for it. I mean, we are essentially talking about an ambition of reducing the need of importing Russian gas that essentially is funding Putin's war machine. So we need to move fast on this, and one of the means to do so is obviously to electrify further and to make sure that there is a demand out there for further electrification as well as using energy as smartly as possible. So that should ought to feed in perfectly within a narrative of competitiveness and resilience and security.
Mm-hmm. So let's dig into that question of the prices of electricity, which keep being high in Europe, at least compared to a number of other geographies. So, Emeline, maybe you can tell us how Europe can address this affordability issue. And for me, there's a question about price and cost. You know, when we are talking about the cost competitiveness of energy, but what's the price signal, and how can we address that?
Good point, but a couple of preliminary remarks on the statement that electricity prices are high. So if we see things in terms of competitiveness gap with the US, for example, yes, gas prices are 4 times, 5 times higher. For electricity prices, the ratio is already better, and then the picture is very mixed. So we're looking at that at the moment in a study with Compass Lexicon, and it actually, several EU member states, electricity prices are already lower than in many US member states, and those happen to be the member states that have decarbonized their power system most. And of course, this will never happen with gas, right? Which is the reason why it will never be cheaper here, which is the reason why we need to electrify and spend the money we spend on gas in developing a cheaper energy system here. And the second point is, because we need to electrify, the absolute level of electricity prices matters, but so does the ratio between price and between gas and electricity prices. And for that, we need a strong carbon price. So we need to preserve the integrity of the European trading system. We need to implement the carbon price on transport and buildings. We need to move forward with that. Now to your question, how do we, so we need, of course, we need the lowest power prices as possible for affordability for household, for industry competitiveness, and to incentivize electrification. There's no silver bullet. There are many things that contribute to that. The first I want to put forward is simply we need to keep the cost of the energy system as low as possible. And what does that take? That takes visibility, predictability, targets, de-risking, so that we can proceed with the transition as fast as possible, but also reduce capital costs. And also reduce scarcity premiums, right? You see that kind of things happening with grid investments. Fatih Birol spent a lot of time on grids. Grids are slow to build, that's true. But then supply chains need to follow as well, and we've seen a peak in the price of some grids components. So having clear targets, visibility allows to build those supply chains, allows to reduce cost of capital and to minimize the cost of the transition. And that means, very importantly, planning and de-risking across the value chain. So that's supply and demand. In several countries today, in France and Germany, you hear things like, oh, electrification is not proceeding as fast as we thought. And that's used, of course, then investors hesitate to go the next mile for offshore wind or other big investments in renewable energies. And why not slow down? But no, that's the other way around, because then, of course, if you have less clean power, investors in electrification will hesitate as well. So you really need to plan and de-risk across the value chain. And I think there's an excellent initiative by the European Commission lately, which is the first industry decarbonization bank. That is an excellent initiative, and we're looking at the moment at how to give it scale and speed in the industry decarbonization bank that comes next year. Then, of course, you need to develop grids. But in the meantime, because grids take time, you also need to use the ones we have as best as we can. And that means digital technologies, that means the right incentives on TSOs, and that means the right market design as well. We recently published a study that shows that, with implementation of local pricing in Germany, you would reduce, you would actually reduce prices for end consumers by quite a lot. The results are quite impressive. So all of those things we need to tune as much as we can, waiting for the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. So on the price side, then, why don't we implement changes if indeed we have proof points that show it can be done?
Sorry, I don't...
On the pricing side,
yeah.
You were mentioning examples where we could actually have lower prices. So where do you see the obstacles here in implementing such a scheme?
local pricing. Well, all those changes always make losers and winners, right? And it's about looking at what's the impact on average and finding a way to compensate, to keep investor certainty, like for any change, and to find a way to cushion the impact on the losers.
Okay, now let's turn to how we accelerate, actually. So, Christian, the share of electricity in Europe, in the overall energy landscape has been stagnant in the past 10 years, a bit above 20%, let's say 23%. How can we really accelerate? I remind everyone that the Europe's target for 2030 is actually 32% for that ratio, which is quite a big shift for the coming years. Where do you think we can accelerate and how?
Perhaps it's a good place to start with the price debate, because what we hear a lot from industries right now is that actually the price point is the biggest challenge for them to electrify. And I think it's really important to understand that we're in a very different place than we were 2-3 years ago at the height of the price crisis. Prices have come down very significantly. Spikes have come down very significantly. Negative prices are on the rise, which means that for anybody who has a technology that can arbitrate, there is a rising business case. Yet we may still face the issue that prices are indeed too high for companies that produce products that are sold all over the world, for them to have a competitive business case if they switch to electricity. And that's one of the areas where we need to devote our political attention. What will be the levers, the mechanisms, the instruments that can help, let's say, meet ends meet, make the customer meet the producer of clean electricity? Here's the Decarbonization Bank, a very good example. We have de-risking instruments that we can explore. But I would also say that it's very important, even if it's not very sexy, to just stay the course and actually implement all the stuff that we've been doing over the last 5 to 10 years. The Green Deal represents a huge opportunity to boost electrification. If we look in the area of transport, in the area of heating, to inject more renewable electricity into the system. And if we combine this with the market reform that we have recently completed at EU level, there's also the opportunity to get better pricing, get better interconnection and integration between markets. Because whereas prices have come down very much in the Nordics, in Spain, where we have a lot of renewables coming into the system, the areas where the price is pegged to gas, Germany, Italy, prices are very high still. And by better interconnecting markets, better connecting Southeastern Europe that has phased out their dispatchable assets very fast, we can actually bring down very substantially. And then last but not least, how to bring about the business case for more DSR. We have 70 provisions in existing legislation that have not been implemented yet, that would actually help the business case and the framework for more DSR in the system. Aggregator frameworks, feed-in of demand into the aggregated demand into the wholesale market, local flex markets, et cetera. So one area where this highly lauded Draghi report is actually not quite correct is on the issue of electricity markets. Here we need to stay the course, implement what we got in order to move forward and boost electrification, boost a better and more integrated electricity system. The last point I'd point to, but that's perhaps more for a broader discussion, is the industrial dimension of this. We've heard how we are becoming more dependent on equipment from other parts of the world. We're exchanging our dependency on gas for dependency on raw materials and kit for the electricity system. Our flexibility strategy, our electrification strategy needs to be one that is well integrated with our security concerns, with our ability to continue to control our system and to thrive industrially.
I see. And in terms, if we were to improve the pricing, as you were saying, in certain geographies like Germany, Italy, through better integration, where do you see the applications that will actually accelerate on the electrical side? What do you think is the path of adoption of electrification?
Well, I think there's so much, frankly, that we can do and that will happen very soon. We are seeing a very encouraging trend in mobility, in particular in EVs, where the adoption is very high in mature markets, still lagging behind in the markets that are characterized by big shares of secondhand cars and a lagging, let's say, infrastructure. So accelerating that infrastructure uptake is also going to help electrification of transport. If we look at heat, the picture is a bit more bleak, to be honest. It's a complex exercise to change heating systems, and the sales of electric heat pumps are on decline. So there's something also to look at from a, let's say, from a national policy perspective. And then I would say with industry, this is where we really need to shift the mindset, show by example that electric solutions are really competitive, especially in the low and medium temperature segments. Here we need the cases, we need concrete examples for people to lean on, because a businessman wants to be sure that he also has the profit in the next quarter. So a major shift in the way he powers his business can be a quite daunting proposition. We need to show that this is a real sort of increase in profit, in efficiency, and that it's a reliable solution. And here I think we have some homework also as industry to show that that if we do it the right way, if we empower our customers to flex, there's actually a lot of money to be made.
Christina, a bit earlier you were saying, digitalization is an enabler of electrification. It goes hand in hand. What is the role you see for your country in digitalization? Which applications you think need to be tackled first?
When we speak about digitalization of the energy sector, we tend to use very beautiful words. Like flexibility, like real data consumption, like everything we heard today and we heard yesterday. However, I'd like to start by saying that digitalization is costly. And in Moldova, we are a very digitalized country. However, when it comes to the energy sector, because we were gas only for many years, we have never really tackled digitalization as an enabler of change. And when the Ministry of Energy was created 2.5 years ago, we thought that it's about time to start piloting a smart metering project. Maybe primitive, I don't know, but if we speak about electrification or long term, if we take into consideration the fact that we decentralize the relationship between the state and the consumers, and we live times when the way we produce, the way we transport and distribute electricity are changing drastically, then we also need to change our relationship with our consumers and make them the managers of their own bills, if you also apply the different prices for electricity. And beside the fact that it's costly, what we have observed and what is the biggest challenge, at least in Moldova, and what I heard is also in other countries that apply differentiated prices for electricity when you have smart metering, is the reluctance coming from consumers, because people, they do not want to become managers of their own bills. They do not want to manage everything they own at home, especially that for many years they didn't do that. And I think despite the fact that we, as policymakers, the distribution operators, the suppliers, everyone in the energy sector, we understand the real benefit of digitalization. The biggest issue is how you educate consumers and make this change happen. However, we will be insisting on that because electrification is impossible without smart metering systems. And we also, as a policy-making institution, have thought about implementing a vision for the next 5 years. And recently we have approved a program that is called the Digital Transformation of the Energy Sector and has 3 big objectives. So the first one is to build a smart and digital infrastructure that will help us ensure interoperability. And within this objective, we are thinking about building a national registry of consumption places, meaning that we want to give only one ID for every single consumption places and avoiding all this fuss and mess that is delivered by every single supplier, especially that once with the liberalization of the electricity market, we'll have a lot of players, suppliers of electricity on the market, and it will be easier for everyone to identify each of us with only one ID. Then we also plan to have a data lake that we are going to call the national platform data. And something I haven't heard during these days is cybersecurity, because if we speak about geopolitics, unfortunately, we have been victims of cyber attacks on a daily basis, and critical infrastructure is critical for everyone. So at the basis of digitalization should be laying cybersecurity, the way we protect our data, and we will be building the first cybersecurity operation center for the electricity domain in the Republic of Moldova. I know that many of you already have this in place in your countries, but as I mentioned earlier, we are learning at a fast pace how to deal with changes and challenges that are coming in the energy sector. And the third one is, of course, including as much as possible renewable energy into the grid, because without digitalization, you cannot actually manage the quantity, the huge quantity that is currently produced, and you cannot AI. So I did not use a verb here, because now with AI you can do anything. And without having this digitalization, you cannot implement any solution. And synthetic data in that case doesn't work. So we need data that is produced automatically. So the role is pivotal, the costs are high, the National Regulatory Agency is against it, because it means during this transition towards green energy, higher costs for every one of us. But if we look at the future, if we believe that the future is electric, is that the data is the new oil, and everything that we work on together as policymakers, as companies, as businesses, is for us to be cost efficient, that definitely digitalization is here to stay and is here to help us evolve and move towards the electrification.
Okay. So, and the importance of the grid through ADMS systems and the integration of renewable. If we move to the local level, we see a lot of activity at region or city level, working on microgrids or electrification. What do you think, Emily, is the role of the regional level and the local level in driving the transition?
So there's a very important role, I believe, for regions and especially cities through their role in infrastructure, in energy infrastructure. We're working a lot on clean heat at the moment, on decarbonization of heat, whether industrial heat or heating in buildings. But it's not only about individual choices of consumers, either residential or industrial. It's also about the grids. Yeah. It's also about what decisions are taken, especially locally, on decommissioning gas grids, on heat planning, having district heating, and all of that. I believe we're in a country that has quite a tradition of doing, anticipating and on those issues and doing heat planning. There's another nice example in Germany, the city of Mannheim, that has set a date for disconnecting the last consumer on the gas grids, but of course in parallel has worked on the solution and has developed across many years a district heating plan with many new connections, and then support mechanisms for those consumers who will not be connected to the district heating for individual heat pumps and so on and so forth. And that's quite crucial, because at the local level, you cannot afford, and that, again, coming back to affordability, every euro that we still put in the gas grid will still be someone is still going to be paying for it in 20 years. So there's really a question of also making the right choices in terms of infrastructure, and at some point deciding to, move away from infrastructure that will be stranded assets. So there's, that's in the next stage of the transition, cities will have a very important role.
And Christian, you wanted to say a word about that?
Yeah, so the whole, let's say, perspective of local also has some very concrete and tangible implications in the system. What we're doing with the energy transition is essentially to decentralize, and we estimate that somewhere between 60 and 70% of all new capacities are connected to low and medium voltage grids. What that means is that the relative role of local grids increases tremendously. That also means that the equation of balancing the grid changes. You may have 50 hertz at transmission level and still have huge problems in the local neighborhood. And that calls for a different setup in terms of the regulatory setup and in terms of the way we balance the grid. So the local solutions, the activation of the customer, the ways to incentivize customers to become active, to balance and time their use of electricity with the availability of the renewable resource is becoming a critical element in the strategy. And the optimization, the local flex solutions there is a critical enabler. We estimate that the potential alone for grid optimization is north of 5 billion euros per year. And that's essentially money that you can put into smart solutions, digital solutions, instead of investing in copper. The last point, I think that was really, really important, because this more complex playing field we have with geopolitical challenges, it indeed means that we need to integrate the cyber dimension, the security dimension, more into our thinking. 5 years ago, the mantra for us was to open up the digital layers, the data layers, to make sure that everybody could do smart services and supply access for companies to provide solutions. Today, we need to think of the fact that if we open up, we also open up to the cyber crooks, to the state-backed actors. So how do we ensure that balance? What is the framework that allows us to operate this in a safe way and make the most of these new solutions? So one of the things that's on the homework side for policymakers is a new energy security framework for Europe, one that is aligned with the age of electricity, as Fatih was phrasing it, one that basically takes into account that the new reality for Europe is we need to be relying on homegrown electricity. But what does that then mean for the system that we build? How do we make sure that we can control this system at all times, that we don't allow foreign actors to have choke points in this system, and that we don't let in the cyber crooks and the state-backed actors in the solutions that we deploy locally?
Okay. Madame Lin, you wanted to react? Yeah?
I also wanted to react.
Go ahead.
This year I attended the biggest exhibition on technologies that was organized in Munich, and 99% of solutions was delivered by China. And I mean digital solutions for the energy sector. So when we speak about the supply chain, and because we are forced to now to concentrate, to give all our energy to solve the war in Europe, unfortunately, we forget that there is also energy, there are also technologies that we need to invest in, and we need to be careful whom we let in to have access to our data. So cybersecurity is here to stay, and is our responsibility to protect every single consumer on the territory of the Republic of Moldova, of European Union, sorry. And to be careful with what technologies, especially if we speak about vehicle-to-grid, what kind of vehicles we let to connect to our grid. So there are many issues that are still not tackled enough, or not put into discussion, so that all the policymakers are aware of the real issues that are happening.
My point was just to formulate a wish for our policymakers, again in relation with the carbon price for the ETS2, carbon price for transport and buildings. Talking of the local dimension and thinking also of the social aspects, we shouldn't forget that those carbon pricing tools first give incentive to electrify, but also are revenues engine for our member states to then reinvest in protecting vulnerable consumers, in helping them transition to clean solutions, and to invest in infrastructure. And so my wish is that after the political compromise that was outlined by the Commission yesterday on the ETS2, that member states move forward to implement this tool.
Mm-hmm. Morten, let's get back to another topic, actually. We've talked a lot about electrification. Energy efficiency has been deployed partially in many European countries with good success. Do you think there's still a place for these technologies today in Europe?
Absolutely, and I think the point that Emily just raised here on ETS2 and ensuring that we implement it in the right manner, given the sensitivities in there, is absolutely critical. But I think overall, what is a bit difficult to understand is, in my opinion, the efficiency measures ticks all the boxes in terms of resilience, competitiveness, prices, what have you, and still, politically, it's treated like, I almost say, a stepchild of some sorts, right? So it's not a big political priority compared to other issues that are more political, sexy, or visible, or what have you. And that's a paradox, in my opinion, given the benefits from efficiency measures. Because again, given the state that Europe is in, and we import all that energy, I mean, we need to be smarter in the way that we use energy. So energy efficiency first principles, still hopefully within the climate law that's being adopted soon, implementing the ETS2, the buildings directive, making sure that the energy efficiency directive is on course, because as you know, our motto is that the cheapest energy is the energy that you do not use. So being smarter in all this seems to me to tick all the boxes. So yes, for sure, efficiency has a big role to play and should play a big role looking forward as well.
What would be ideas to actually make it more visible at the forefront?
No, I think it's fair to acknowledge what the Commission is doing actually in ensuring that energy efficiency first principle is still in there, that energy efficiency at large is still given political priority, and then we have to fight to keep it in there in order to ensure that we implement it accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for your remarks, observation on the market and on how we can drive faster electrification in Europe. I'll say a few words to actually conclude, but thank you for the interaction. Moving over there, thanks. So a few things that we've heard. Very clearly, I think there's a clear consensus to say we want to accelerate electrification in Europe. There were lots of discussions about how pricing or smarter pricing will actually play a role in the adoption. We've heard, for instance, in terms of usage, mobility or EV is kind of in a driving seat, and actually we've heard it from Dr. Birol also. It's one of the drivers of the electrification at large scale, not just in Europe, in the world. We've heard about the idea that carbon prices could actually create the right context and incentives to be able to continue to invest. Of course, we are facing a market where electricity has to be competitive for homeowners, but also particularly for industry, because it's a base for competitiveness on the industrial side. And so then there's the rest. I mean, the rest of the market is particularly the building market, the tertiary building market, where the question of energy efficiency still needs to be captured. That's the big focus of the EPBD at European level. We've heard also the need to always think about the infrastructure. You've heard about the ratio, you know, €1 of investment in renewables or in new power generation probably should be associated with €1 more on the grid. And on the grid, we understand it's both hardware investments to expand and extend the grid, but it's also a lot of software. We've talked about digitalization. When we are talking about integrating more renewables in the grid, it's a lot about software capabilities. When it comes to digitalization, we've heard a number of warnings on cybersecurity. That's something that we pay a lot of attention to in Schneider, actually. So cybersecurity, we have two topics. We have cybersecurity on the IT side. You know, that's where the question of data, privacy, and protection is very important. We should also think about the cybersecurity of the operational systems, everything around industrial systems and infrastructure. We've heard about a new energy landscape where decentralization will be much more ubiquitous than it was in the past, which means companies, probably local and regional authorities, have much more of a role to play. We like the idea in Schneider, for instance, that many companies, when they own factories or buildings, can actually solarize, install storage, and participate to the mesh grid, if you want, of the future. So we need to think differently about the energy infrastructure, an infrastructure that is much less centralized, and which also means that the economic players, each of them, companies, but also homeowners, have a role, can play decision, can help move the needle. Each of them, when they're making decisions, and you've heard about the main application cases, buying a new car, air conditioning, making the permitting for AI infrastructure in our countries easier, has an impact in moving us towards a more electrified Europe. Now, I'd like to conclude with one point. Electrifying Europe is investing in ourselves. Yes, it is true that some of the components, solar panels particularly, come from elsewhere, from China, but all the studies show that as we electrify, the value creation is extremely local, because it's a lot about engineering, it's a lot about workforce installing these systems, maintaining them. In fact, a number of analyses show we could electrify and solarize 10 times more rooftops in Europe than today. That, you know, in terms of service, maintenance, engineering, construction, it could add 1 million jobs in Europe. So again, this is transforming an investment where, or a cost where we are buying today a lot from outside Europe, gas, oil and gas, to actually building infrastructure with recurring jobs in Europe. So we have reasons to be optimistic, but beyond being optimistic or pessimistic, we really need to move to action. The most important message here is each of us has a role to play. We have to make Europe move towards more electrification and more digitalization. Thank you very much.